He wrote that she had ruined his life, and then that she was the only one who had believed in him. 30 years had passed, but those were the words she remembered. In the name in the notebook. The letter arrived on an ordinary gray Thursday when everything felt as if it had already happened before. She pulled it from the mailbox without glancing at the return address and placed it on the kitchen table between a half-finished cup of tea and a stack of old magazines. Only a few hours later, after brushing the crumbs off the tablecloth and washing the dishes, did she open the envelope. The handwriting was steady, the script unfamiliar. She reread the first lines 3 times. "You ruined my life. I thought I had forgotten, that you were just a name in a school ledger. But I suppose you were the only one who left a scar." She froze, holding the letter in both hands. The chair creaked as she sat down. The words were cold, metallic. No greeting, no signature, just a measured accusation, though a tremor ran through it. Then came the invitation, or the challenge. "I'd like to talk. I'll be in town on Friday. The cafe across from the old school. 5 p.m. If you have the decency, come." She laid the letter on the table as if it were something dangerous, radioactive. Tried to recall, who could it be? Who wrote like that? Who hadn't forgiven? She had taught many students, hundreds. Sometimes when she awoke in the night, she dreamt of their faces, blurred, aging, disappearing. Some had vanished into nothing. Some had sent postcards of thanks. But this one? No, this one had come for something. She read the letter again, and suddenly in the final paragraph, in faint, almost erased script, "You were the first to tell me I wasn't an empty space, but maybe it would have been better if you'd stayed silent." She didn't know what to say, but she knew she'd be there on Friday. She opened the old drawer without much hope of finding anything, just looking for a thread, name, face, any clue to untangle the past. The envelope had no signature, only handwriting, as if left by someone who had been silent too long. At the bottom of the drawer was a shoebox tied with a faded ribbon. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside, photographs, newspaper clippings, a few letters from former students, and one school notebook, its cover yellowed with age. Beneath the notebook, an old photograph, Class 10B. She stood at the blackboard, young, stern, in a dark dress, chalk in hand. In the background, teenagers, one smiling, one staring off, one rolling his eyes. And in the far corner, him. Even then he sat apart, as if he wanted to erase himself from the picture. Now she remembered his name, Daniel. Thin, prematurely adult, with eyes always bracing or burning. Difficult for everyone. Unpinned. Once caught with beer behind the school, another time with a bloody nose after a fight. But in his notebooks, thoughts no one else had. She recalled a line from one of his essays. "Silence is the scream of those no one hears anymore." Other teachers had begged her to stop defending him, said he was lost, but she couldn't. Maybe out of stubbornness, maybe intuition, maybe because one afternoon he had lingered after class, approached the blackboard and whispered, "You have no idea how destructive it is to be believed in," and left before she could answer. She also remembered something few knew. Once during an exam, a weaker student, Gilles, had handed in a surprisingly polished paper. Structure, citations, even a quote from Sartre. Suspicion stirred, but there was no proof. Days later, Daniel left a notebook on her desk. No name. Inside was the same essay, his messy corrections in the margins. Not a confession, a challenge. When she asked him why, he shrugged. "Just wanted to see if anyone would notice the difference between us," and added, looking her straight in the eye, "Maybe he had a better chance if you thought it was his." His defiance wasn't in violence, it was in paradox. Now looking at the photo, she saw something for the first time. He wasn't looking at the camera, he was looking at her, and in that gaze, resentment, confusion, fear of being seen, or not seen. She ran her finger along the corner of the photograph, and for the first time felt worry, not for herself, for him. She arrived 10 minutes early. The old cafe across from the school had hardly changed. Same checkered curtains, same worn wooden tables. Only the bakery next door was now a phone shop. Inside, it smelled of cinnamon and something faintly familiar, as if from a past that wasn't hers. She chose a table by the window. Through the glass, the school came into view, empty, its plaster peeling. Her wing had long been shut down, but in the back classroom, the chalkboard still stood, with quotes she used to write before each lesson. Every word is a choice. Every silence, too. He entered at 4:59. She recognized him instantly, despite the 30 years. The suit was expensive, his stride deliberate. He held his phone like even that gesture carried weight. But the look in his eyes, that hadn't changed, tense and wound tight, like a wire stretched too far. "You came," he said, "not sitting yet." "I couldn't not come," she answered. He nodded and sat across from her, placed his phone face down. A few seconds, silence. No smile, no relief. He stared at his hands, then the window, then her again. "I—" He paused, took a sip of water, set the glass down, shifted it slightly. "I used to think you were just like the rest, that you didn't care." She tilted her head slightly, not in surprise, attention. "But then, I realized you did worse." He clasped his fingers tightly. "You believed." He glanced at her, then looked away again. "And I became who I was supposed to be, not because I wanted to, because I didn't have the right to disappoint. Out of protest, out of anger, out of fear that I'd become nobody again." He fell silent, breathing unevenly. She said softly, "So you never forgave me?" He gave a bitter smile, no joy in it. "I have everything, supposedly." He looked out the window as if checking for rain. "Money, status, office on the 25th floor, employees waiting for instructions." Pause. "But every morning I wake up, and I can't remember why I'm going there." "Because it's not you," she said. He nodded. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not me, but someone you once imagined." Quietly. "You wanted to save me, but you didn't ask if I wanted saving." She didn't reply. He looked her in the eyes for the first time. "Did you ever wonder how it feels to be saved without consent?" He meant to leave first. It was clear from the way his hands were poised, the way his gaze drifted to the window again and again, from the unfinished phrase clinging to him like fog. "Wait," she said. He stopped halfway to the door, as if allowing himself one moment of hesitation. She took the notebook from her bag. Yellowed, edges worn, still marked with a crooked label. "Daniel G." He froze. "I don't know why I didn't return it back then. Maybe I felt you'd need it one day." He took the notebook cautiously, like it was evidence. Turned the first page, then the next. The handwriting, uneven, teenage, sharp, sometimes ornate, as if he were trying to hide himself in his words. She leaned forward and read softly, "If I ever become someone, it will be out of spite, toward those who waited for me to fail, those who walked past me, and maybe those who believed." He lowered his gaze. His fingers clutched the cover. "I remember that," he said quietly. "Back then, I thought showing weakness would stick longer than any success. I wrote to keep from feeling, so you wouldn't pity me." He flipped a few more pages, stopped. "This, I remember especially." He turned the notebook toward her. On the page, an essay written with biting irony, the title and empty eyes before the blackboard. A vignette that clearly described her, dry, supposedly strict, but with uncertainty wrapped in chalk dust. "I wrote it on purpose," he admitted. "Wanted to hurt you, humiliate you, see how far I could go. And I gave it an A," she said gently. He nodded, smiled faintly without relief. "That's what threw me. You didn't turn away, didn't get angry. You just accepted it, as if I wasn't a threat, as if I were human." He sat down again. The notebook lay between them like a bridge or a wall. "Since then, I haven't known who I was to you. A student, an adversary, an empty space, a reflection." And to yourself, she asked. He didn't answer immediately. He closed the notebook slowly, almost reverently. All this time I've tried to silence him, the one who wrote back then. And now I'm afraid to hear him again. The school stood like a forgotten ship, stranded on the shore of time. The second-floor windows were boarded up, the paint on the facade peeled away, the gate rusted and creaked at the lightest touch. And yet the building still held its shape, and somehow its breath. "You knew it was abandoned?" he asked. "I didn't need to know. I could feel it." They followed the path leading to the side entrance. The door was unlocked. When she pressed the handle, it gave with a soft click, like something had been waiting for their return. Inside, it smelled of dust, wood, and something else. Faint, elusive, like chalk. The walls felt lower, the hallways narrower. In one of the classrooms, someone had once tried to start repairs. Sheets of drywall lay unopened on the floor. A dried paintbrush rested on a desk. They entered her old classroom. The blackboard still hung on the wall. Not fully erased. Through the smudges, chalk words from decades ago still showed, "To believe is to take a risk." He stopped, stared at the phrase like it was a sentence. He stepped forward, ran his fingers over the board, then picked up a piece of chalk from the windowsill, rolled it between his fingers, hesitant, as if he wanted to write something, but didn't know what letter to start with. "I wrote a withdrawal letter myself, you know," he said, still looking at the board. "The principal was ready. My parents, too." It felt like relief, almost joy. She stayed silent. "But you didn't submit it. You hid it. Said I deserved a chance. But I didn't ask. Not for a chance. Not for saving." He placed the chalk gently back on the sill, turned to face her. "You thought you were fighting for me, but I felt like you were denying me the right to disappear." "You wanted to disappear." He pressed his lips together, shrugged. "I wanted someone, just once, to let me lose, to let me go. But you held on. And ever since, I've done everything out of defiance, to prove I could have walked away, that I didn't owe salvation to anyone." He approached the last desk, sat down, placing his hands on the worn wood, like he had once before. "I hated that board. Every time you wrote something inspiring, I knew. It wasn't for me. It was like someone else's light in a locked room." "And now?" she asked. He looked at the board again, for a long time, then gave a tired half smile. "Now I'm not even sure I was ever in that room." He stood, glanced around the classroom, walls, windows, the faint trace of his touch on the board, but wrote nothing. "I don't know if I've forgiven you," he said, "but I've never forgotten." They returned to the cafe in silence. She didn't push the conversation. There was no longer anger in him, only the residue of something left unsaid. He ordered black coffee, but didn't take a sip. The cup remained untouched, like an intention abandoned at the last moment. He spoke first. "I wrote to you so many times, 10, 15 letters, tore them all up. Each said something different. Accusation, sarcasm, blame. Only one thing was always there, the hope that you'd remember." She listened without interrupting. It wasn't an excuse, and it wasn't confession, just the voice of someone exhausted by the noise inside him. "I built everything out of resistance. Every project, a rebuttal. Every achievement, a scream into a void. See? I didn't vanish. And all that time, a fear that you wouldn't even remember my name." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, placed it on the table. "Inside our class photo, 10B. I kept it all these years. Sometimes thought about burning it, but couldn't, because in it, there's a moment when someone looked at me, not like a problem." She picked up the envelope carefully without opening it. "You said I had no right to save you." "I know." He said it almost in a whisper, as if even now there was no point in arguing. "Sometimes saving someone isn't about deciding for them," she continued. "It's simply being there, when no one else is." He lowered his eyes, sat in silence for a long time. "Why didn't you defend yourself?" he asked quietly. "Say you were right?" Because being right wasn't the point. If you're here, alive, thinking, feeling, then maybe I wasn't completely wrong. He nodded, not in agreement, in recognition. He stood, this time calmly. His movements were slightly slower. He paused as if wanting to say something. His lips moved faintly, as though the words were chosen, but not spoken. He touched the envelope with the photo, then left it on the table, turned and walked away. She didn't watch him go, only placed her hand gently over the notebook beside her. Her fingers lingered on the cover a little longer than necessary. She didn't know if he had forgiven her, but she knew he came, and sometimes that was enough. She woke earlier than usual. The light had not yet filled the room, but a pale strip of gray already lay across the kitchen windowsill, promising a quiet, dry day. She brewed her tea as always, strong, with a dash of milk, and stepped to the window. The neighbor's lilac bent under its own weight, the blossoms too heavy this year. Everything in the world felt a bit slower, a bit quieter, as if even silence itself was asking to be noticed. On the chair beside her lay the envelope, that one, the photograph of the class, of her by the blackboard, of him in the corner, slightly apart. No note, no writing, just the edges touched by time. Next to it, the notebook, open to the page where he had first allowed himself to be heard. She read a few lines aloud, almost in a whisper. The words sounded different now, no longer like a cry, like a trace. She took a box from the cupboard, the one where she kept rare letters, school photos, forgotten postcards. For a long time, she hadn't known why she saved them. Now, she still didn't know. She folded the notebook and the photograph carefully inside, closed the box slowly, pausing between movements. On the lid, she placed a new slip of paper. On it, only 2 words. Do not discard. She returned to the window. Life passed by as usual. A dog on a leash, the fogged windows of the bakery, teenagers with headphones, staring into their phones. None of them knew that today was different, because somewhere, one person had come and said nothing. She didn't know what he meant to leave behind. Forgiveness, recognition, a final reproach. There was no answer, and perhaps there never would be. But he came, and now that was hers to carry. Sometimes lessons don't end with a bell. Sometimes the most important ones happen decades later, in cafes, in old photographs, in unsigned notebooks. Sometimes the question echoes quieter than forgiveness.